We are live.
The meeting of the Committee of Whole Operations is now called to order. I would ask that you rise if you are able for the reading of the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who served our community and who are no longer with us, so that we may continue to do the work we must in their memory. You may be seated. Now, has the roll been taken?
Yes, it has.
Members of the committee, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest on the items appearing on today's agenda? Seeing none. Items at this time, I would ask members of the committee what items they would like to separate for discussion purposes. Councillor Scoli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to separate 6.1.3 Brantford Transit and 6.1.6 Intimate Partner Violence.
Thank you. Any, Councillor Caputo?
I was going to separate 613, but it already has.
Very well. Anyone else? Okay. There's one delegation on tonight. Prior to hearing the delegation, I would like to remind those in the meeting today to follow the rules of decorum as set forth in the city's procedural bylaw. They apply: no person shall display any sign, banner, or placard in the meeting room other than materials that, in the option of the chair, are legitimate audiovisual aids necessary in connection with any presentation to be made to council. All persons present shall use polite and respectful language and shall refrain from the use of any language or the making of any gesture that is disrespectful or offensive. I think I jumped ahead. Yeah, I know. I just realized that now. Yep. My apologies. All right. Do. I thought it was right here. Yeah, okay. As there is a delegation for item 7.2, we will move that resolution up prior to the items for consideration to be dealt with. Councillor Carpenter, can you please move the motion to approve all items?
It's on the screen. Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by a ward mate, that all items contained within consideration consent item 6.1 and 6.2 not separated for discussion purpose be approved.
I would ask the clerk to please read the titles of all items that are subject to the vote and then proceed with the vote.
Thank you. All those items that are subject to the vote are item 6.1.2, Building Safer Communities 2024-2026 Action Plan, 6.1.4, Changes to the Solid Waste Collection Routes and Collection Days, 6.1.5, Healthy Kids Action Plan 2024 to 2028, 6.1.7, Master Servicing Plan Update, Non-Competitive Procurement, 6.2.1, the minutes, 6.2.2, the 2023 Annual Summary Report for the City of Brantford Wastewater System, and item 6.2.3, the 2023 Annual Summary Report for the City of Brantford Water System. Thank you. Those items carried unanimously on a recorded vote of 11-0. All those voting in favor are Councillors Sullivan, Celeste McCrary, Hunt, Van Tilburg, Samwell Carpenter, Martin Caputo, Sequoia, Mayor Davis.
Thank you. Now everybody gets to hear this again. There's one delegation on the agenda this evening. Prior to hearing the delegations, I would like to remind those in the meeting today of the following rules of decorum as set forth in the city's procedural bylaw that apply. No person shall display any sign, banner, or placard in the meeting room other than materials that, in the opinion of the chair, are legitimate audiovisual aids necessary in connection with the presentation to be made to council. All persons present shall use polite, respectful language and shall refrain from the use of any language or the making of any gesture that is disrespectful or offensive. All persons addressing council shall speak only on the subject in debate and shall not speak on any other subject. No person shall applaud participants in the debate or engage in conversation or behavior that may disrupt the proceedings of the meeting. So at this time, we do have a delegate. I would like to call Barbara Sutherland, Chair of the Downtown Brantford BIA. Please give your name and your address.
Good evening. Barbara Sutherland, 8 Oliver Court, Brantford, and Downtown BIA. Good evening, everyone. Waste management is a matter that affects the heart of our community, essentially garbage pickup in downtown Brantford. As we navigate through the challenges of living and working in downtown Brantford, it has become increasingly evident that the timing of garbage collection plays a pivotal role in maintaining the cleanliness and livability of our city's downtown area. The Downtown Brantford BIA supports the proposed earlier schedule for garbage pickup and the installation of a central drop-off bins for the following reasons. First and foremost, an earlier pickup time means cleaner streets. By collecting garbage earlier in the day, we minimize the risk of waste accumulating and creating unsightly and unsanitary conditions in our downtown. A clean environment not only enhances the aesthetic appeal of our city, but it also promotes a sense of pride and well-being among the residents and visitors alike. An earlier garbage pickup schedule contributes to public health and safety. There are fewer pedestrians walking around the late pickup garbage bags. Waste left unattended for extended periods can attract pests and vermin, posing health hazards to our community. By prompting removal of garbage from our streets, we mitigate the risk of disease transmission and ensure a safer environment for everyone. Additionally, an earlier pickup time allows for the rhythm of the Brantford's downtown life. As businesses, students, and residents begin their day, having garbage collected early allows for seamless operations and uninterrupted productivity. It eliminates the inconvenience of navigating around overflowing bins and countless bags and ensures that our downtown remains a vibrant, clean, safe, and welcoming place for commerce and social activities. An earlier schedule demonstrates our commitment to the environment, environmental stewardship, and aligns with the City of Brantford Downtown Priority Plan, a community vision for the city center. An earlier garbage pickup schedule can alleviate the issue of garbage scavenging by disadvantaged individuals who are living rough in our downtown. By removing waste promptly, we reduce the likelihood of those individuals having to resort to digging through bins in search of necessities of life. This compassionate approach not only addresses the immediate concerns of scavenging, but also opens avenues for providing support and assistance to those in need in our community. In conclusion, the benefits of implementing an earlier garbage pickup schedule in downtown Brantford are undeniable. It enhances cleanliness, it promotes public health and safety, supports economic vitality, and underscores our dedication to environmental responsibility, while also addressing social issues like scavenging for food and other items. If approved, the Downtown Brantford BIA encourages the City of Brantford to communicate the new plan to our membership and residents often and in an easy to understand message. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Council have any questions? Seeing none?
Seeing none.
Oh, Council Carpenter.
So you fully support the recommendations of the plan.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions? You can take a seat. We'll be discussing this shortly.
Thank you very much.
I would now like to ask Craig Binning and Andrew Marabella from Henson Consulting to come forward to present item 6.1, the DAP Development Application Fee Review and Development Front and Funding and Reimbursement Policy. A reminder, you'll have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be before committee this evening. I'm going to cover up the first issue on the front-end financing. We can go on to the next slide. What has prompted this and what the idea here is that as the city is growing, especially in the northern boundary expansion area in Tutuila Heights, it was recognized that the city might be challenged in delivering some of the key infrastructure in a timely way due to fiscal constraints. This policy allows for cooperation with the development industry to seek their assistance in front-end financing some of those works, and addresses all of the details necessary to make that equitable for all parties and also make it clean and transparent. It's important to recognize that the city it's at their discretion and control in these types of agreements, and they can always make the decision whether to proceed or not. The next slide just provides a overview of the document that we've produced. It's a very robust policy, and I want to thank staff for their excellent time and comments on the development of this policy. It's very extensive, it details, and it covers off all of the areas of critical importance in terms of arriving at these kinds of agreements with the development industry for front-ending of works. The next slide just addresses some of the applicability requirements. Really, these kinds of agreements relate to hard infrastructure or engineering infrastructure, in particular roads, water, sanitary sewers, and stormwater infrastructure needs. We anticipate that this policy will really just apply to the northern boundary expansion area and Tutela Heights, as there's real keen interest to deliver that infrastructure to allow the development to proceed. It's important to note that this deals with works that are identified in the city's development charge background study, and as such would result in credits against those payables, but in a controlled manner. And once again, it's up to the city's discretion to move forward on these kinds of agreements. The next slide provides a series of the eligibility requirements, and I won't read through them all, but critically, it's important that the development industry needs to enter into this agreement with the city. There's tight controls over how the credits are to be provided, and there's scope to the service to which the agreement relates. So if a developer is willing to front-end finance a road extension or a water or sewer main, their credits would be restricted to that component of the development charges. We've also ensured that entering into these kinds of agreements doesn't create a negative impact on the city's development charge reserve funds or on their internal annual repayment limit. The final slide in my segment of the presentation is just really the schematic overview of how this process would work. And I just wanted to stress to the committee that really what the process involves is an internal review committee of your staff from key departments, engineering, finance, and purchasing would do the initial review of any applications to determine whether or not there was merit. If it goes forward with merit, then they would develop a more detailed set of reporting that would come to council for their consideration, and if approved, would then go through the process of finalizing the agreement with the industry or the developer and making sure that everything is done in a legal, transparent, and quantifiable manner. And with that, I will pass it on to my colleague, Mr. Mirabella, to deal with the second part of our presentation.
Thanks, Craig. Good evening, committee members. So if we go to the next slide, I can get into the development application fee components. So as part of the process, Hempstead was also retained to undertake a full cost of service development application review for planning applications, fees under the building code, and engineering review fees. As part of our study process, effectively, we look at calculating the full cost recovery rates to provide the city and council with information to be used when setting full cost recovery fees or otherwise. If we go to the next slide, just to provide a bit of an overview of our analysis, in terms of the total average annual cost of providing services, we've ended up with a cost of about nearly $9 million a year for those three particular application review services, which is largely comprised of two key components. We have our direct costs and our indirect costs. The planning, building, and engineering fee reviews are pretty labor-intensive type exercises. Most of the costs that we see are direct cost related, and it's the people involved, so the salaries and benefits of those departments and those people actually doing the review services. We also incorporate the resources used by those people within the operating budget as part of our process. And then we also incorporate the indirect costs, which is our corporate override, recognizing that there is a share of costs from other departments and divisions that are not directly related in managing the application review process and delivering it, but they are responsible for managing the corporation, and those costs are attributed to the process. The pie graph shows the distribution of those between the three services and the relationship to the corporate overhead, which represents about 12% of the total rate, of the total cost. Sorry. We go to the next slide. So what does that mean on a service by service basis, and where are the gaps in terms of the revenues that we're looking at over the planning period relative to the cost, both direct and indirect? We see a variance in terms of our total cost of providing services for planning and development engineering in the range of about 45 and 35% respectively between planning and engineering, which means that there's a shortfall in terms of the cost of delivering that service and the particular revenues you would be receiving. On the building code side of things, there is a pretty narrow, you're pretty close in terms of your costs and your revenues. Generally speaking, you're at full cost recovery there, and there's effectively no change or to the rates that we would see under the Building Code Act or building permit fee services that we have. If we go to the next slide, just to kind of set that into perspective, because of the parameters of the legislation, we set the gap in terms of total costs and revenues, but the fees and the variance is calculated on an application by application basis. And they're differentiated between your planning fees and your development engineering fees. And what we have is the range of differences between the different fee categories for the existing fee, which was at 2022 when we undertook the study, and then the calculated full cost recovery fee. And then we have the same type of relationship on the development engineering fees, particularly their involvement and relationship to planning fees and their involvement in it. They have separate fees for them. So as I see here, that we're not going to go through every single one of them, but the fee ranges and the differences are by application type, which makes up the total variance that we saw on the previous slide. Notably, some of the fees are at full cost recovery, while some aren't. I think the biggest one is on your plan of subdivisions in your engineering fee. We're seeing very little movement on that fee, particularly because that cost or that service fee is at the cost of recovery of doing business there. We go to the next slide, just to be cognizant of some of the changes that we're seeing. There's some implementation considerations which is being put forth by the city. When you're setting fee rates, you want to consider obviously the general benefit of some of these services, competitiveness, any revenue shortfall arising from implementing less than full cost recovery rates, and the applicant's ability to pay the fees in relationship to some of the long-term strategic objectives. So following some of those discussions with staff, alternative cost recovery scenarios were being put forward in which the phase-in of those rates, both planning and development engineering, over a 3-year period. With that planning, moving to increase the rates over a 3-year period with achieving a more targeted cost recovery of about 80% by the end of the 3-year period, and development engineering moving towards more of a 90% cost recovery over a 3-year period. As I mentioned earlier, building is already at cost recovery as it is, and there's no phase-in, and you continue to in place the fees as you have right now. So with that said, if you go to the next slide, just to kind of show the phase-in, and we've set the phase-in and the cost recovery approach to be different by different application type. Obviously, with the movement of your current rates to kind of move to a 60, 70 to 80% cost recovery by that 3rd year. And as you continue to increase the fees and get closer to cost recovery, it limits the shortfalls that would otherwise be realized as you are today. Some of the fees we're seeing kind of no movement on. For example, things such as a minor variance, which are obviously historically, not just in the city, but in other municipalities, discounted as a general benefit to the resident. Those will maintain at a much lower cost recovery than 80%, but each of the individual fees have different cost recovery relationships and targets, and we try to recognize that through the phase-in schedule, and that will be continued to be monitored by city staff as you move through the phase-in period to maintain kind of cost recovery and competitiveness over that period. On the next slide, just to kind of the same notion on the engineering fees, and recognizing that you're at a kind of 65% cost recovery, moving to 90% over that 3-year period. So those phase-in approaches are again taking place over that longer term period to kind of provide some leeway into getting to closer to cost recovery. And I think that's pretty much out of time, but I will have one more slide just on next steps here. obviously we're here today at the committee of the whole with our presentation of results. I believe this will be coming back for council approval on March 26th. And then subsequently, the fees will be implemented via bylaw with consideration for those such things as your phase-in provisions, competitiveness, and your cost recovery objectives, while being considerate of any other ongoing fee initiatives that's going on in the municipality. We will note that the fees moving forward should continue to be adjusted for indexation practices to ensure that the rates are adjusted to account for the effects of inflation. With that, that is the end of both Craig and myself's presentation. I think we may have just met the 10-minute mark.
Thank you. We can actually have questions once this is on the floor. Okay, committee will now consider item 7.2, followed by items that were separated for discussion purposes. Mayor Davis, please read your resolution and state your seconder.
So seeking a seconder, Councillor Samwell, being a Ward 5 councillor. So whereas Chapter 440 of the Municipal Code, solid waste materials are collected in the downtown core 6 days a week, except on Sundays between 9:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. And the solid waste materials are to be placed curbside for collection between 12 a.m. to 9 a.m. And whereas garbage bags set out in the city's collection in the downtown negatively impacts the image of our downtown. And whereas in 2021, City Council appointed a downtown Brantford Improvement Task Force consisting of many local stakeholders to respond to the challenges faced in the downtown core. And whereas in April 2022, Brantford City Council endorsed Brantford's downtown priority plan, a community vision for the city center that was developed after public engagement. And whereas the downtown priority plan identifies improving the cleanliness and image of downtown as a key priority related to growth and vibrancy in downtown Brantford. And whereas city staff of the downtown business improvement area have identified solutions to reduce and eventually eliminate garbage bags in the downtown. And whereas use of an above ground drop-off bin location, the downtown core for businesses until underground bins are installed through the downtown revitalization project would assist in maintaining the cleanliness of the downtown. Now therefore be it resolved, one, that following modification of Chapter 440 of the Municipal Code be approved by City Council. In particular, solid waste materials are collected in the downtown 6 days a week, except on Sundays between 7 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. And the solid waste materials are to be placed at the curb for collection between 12 a.m. and 7 a.m. effective Wednesday, May 1st. And that the installation and operation of a drop-off bins be approved at municipal lot number 4, that's next to the old Expositor building, located at the intersection of Dalhousie Street and King Street for downtown core businesses to dispose of curbside garbage, recyclable, and organic materials at any time, including Sundays. 2, that a funding of $45,000 for the drop-off bins installation on a concrete pad with appropriate wooden fencing, a lockable gate, enhanced lighting, and security camera be approved by council from the Council Priorities Reserve Fund in 2024. And 3, that a funding of $30,000 per year be approved from Landfill Reserve for the operating period from July 2024 to December 2026 for operating and maintaining the drop-off bins upon installation, including emptying of the garbage, recyclable, and organic materials from the bins, power washing of the area, promotion, education activities, and payment for the use of 2 parking spaces. And 4, that staff bring back a report to council in 2026 if continuation of the operation of the drop-off bins is required.
Now, before we go forward with this, you have to go forward with waiving the rules.
Yes. So if I can have that motion. So same seconder, I believe, Councillor Samwell. Put it up there for us. Yeah, so I'm not going to read the whole thing again, other than this in particular is the first sentence. Section 15.11.6 of Chapter 115 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code be waived to deem the item urgent in order that it be considered outside the budget process, which, Mr. Chair, would have it being considered about a year from now. So this would be the first step. We want to deal with this at this time.
Okay. Call the vote.
Thank you. The motion to waive the rule is carried on a recorded vote of 11-0. All those voting in favor are Councillor Sullivan, Slash, McCreary, Hunt, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Carpenter, Martin, Caputo, Secoli, and Mayor Davis.
Any discussion on the actual motion? Mayor Davis, seeming you carried it.
All right. I think we can all agree that the way in which garbage is collected in the downtown doesn't make anybody happy. The current system that has the garbage being let out up until 9 AM and then the pickup by our contractor occurring through to 11 or noon, you know, it results in there being garbage on the street and bags. Oftentimes the bags are ripped open. People going to work, going to university or college, people moving back and forth from their own residences in the downtown. What are they met with when they get to the sidewalk? A frankly disgusting mess. And you know, it's unfortunate. We've kind of come to live with that in our downtown. It's over the course of a number of years, it's become the status quo. And it actually was a resident's a fairly outspoken critique of council. He brought it to my attention late last year, and I agree with him. This was something that we needed to correct and address. And there have been attempts made in the past. Back in 2000, I think it was 2013, 2014, I believe was Councillor Rutley tried to bring forward something actually very similar that was not successful. And it wasn't successful because there were various businesses in the downtown that objected, that it was going to create too much of an inconvenience. But, you know, I think we've reached the stage with our downtown that, you know, we can't find a solution of the garbage that's going to satisfy everybody. But of overriding importance, though, is we make a unified effort to make our downtown as safe and as clean as possible. I think this will go a long ways towards doing that. It also, I think, will help businesses downtown prepare for how garbage will be collected in the downtown once we've redone Colborne and Dalhousie streets. That's the total infrastructure rebuild, the streetscape rebuild, which will be done over the next 3 to 4 years. The end result of that will be there'll be no more garbage being placed in bags at curbside. The garbage collection system will be what are called mulniks, or they're garbage receptacles buried into the ground that can be removed by the contractor, placed strategically throughout the downtown, and people and businesses will take their garbage to those large in-ground receptacles. And that'll be built into the downtown infrastructure as we rebuild those streets. So the downtown garbage collection system is going to change anyways, and this will act as a bridge to help businesses and those who live and work in the downtown getting used to what will be the new system. And hopefully, in the meantime, it will result in less garbage being left on the sidewalk when people are coming into the downtown. It'll result in a cleaner downtown. And I'm hoping a lot of businesses will use the bin system. And in fact, you'll see fewer garbage bags curbside for collection early in the morning. Yes, the reason why this didn't work before, because there was a proposal to change that collection time to before 9 AM 4 or 5 years ago. And the reason why it wasn't accepted is because there are businesses in the downtown that they don't open their business until after 9. And so very inconvenient for them to have somebody there before their store opens to put the garbage up. Well, with this system, there will be this bin in the parking lot next to the old Expositor building. It'll be secured, as you can see in the resolution. There'll be a lock and code system, and businesses in the downtown will be given that code. So they can, at any time of the day, 24/7, take their refuse, garbage, and put it into the bin using the code system. That code system won't be generally available at this time to people that live in the downtown, because if it becomes too well known, the code, then it'll be vandalized and subject to disruption. So the idea is that in the interim, until we have the Molonik system, that downtown business owners, through the BIA, hopefully, will be able to use the code system, access this bin system, and be able to deposit the garbage whenever they wish to. So I think there's a lot to recommend to this program. And as I said, it will address a problem that we've left fester for far too long with, I think, some pretty simple workable solutions. I can answer any questions you might have. We certainly have staff here as well, because I didn't just do this resolution myself, worked with the BIA and also city staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Carpenter?
Thank you. I will support this. This is a stopgap measure, as the mayor has said, until such time as we can convince the downtown merchants that Molochs are the way to go, and they really are the way to go. We tried to bring it in some time ago. And we kind of were a little frustrated that downtown merchants thought that we shouldn't do Molochs. You know, the downtown is the only place where we collect commercial garbage 6 days a week. No resident gets a 6-day garbage pickup. None of them. Commercial developments outside the core don't get 6-day pickup. So finding a way to keep the garbage off the street, so that when you're down there going to a restaurant, you're not stepping over garbage bags because, you know, a coffee shop closed or another business closed early at 5 o'clock to put their garbage out for the next morning. This is a good solution to get off the street. We have to encourage them to get it off the street as well. And the BIA, I'm sure, will do that. We'll work towards doing that. But keep in mind, this is only the downtown core. This isn't all the downtown. It's not the lower downtown. It's just the main downtown core. So we should make sure we have a map of that so public knows exactly where what this applies to. And really, the downtown merchants should be grateful, quite frankly, that we're looking for a solution to get garbage bags off the street, and we're providing pickup on a regular basis. So the question I would have would be, the bin will be emptied on a regular basis as we know how it feels, and it'll take a while to figure out what that cycle will look like based upon how well it's being used and the volumes. So I'd imagine that the collection truck will pick it up once we get used to it, just like condos do, and private sector businesses that have they pay for theirs themselves, by the way. And so they have a similar process. So I think this is a good stopgap measure to get us to the Molochs with the redevelopment downtown, and we'll end up with a cleaner downtown for all to be able to put the garbage, whether you're living downtown or working downtown. The Moloch system is really the way to go. And because it's deep in the ground, it needs to be done as part of the reconstruction of the downtown. So that makes sense. So I will support this recommendation, and I congratulate the mayor for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Councillor Samwell.
So first, I just wanted to thank Barbara and Annette from the BIA for being here in support of this, so we could be aware that they're in support. I think this is a great option to create a cleaner downtown, and I look forward to supporting this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scully.
Yes, thank you. When I was reading this, I was reminded of the broken window theory, which states visible signs of disorder tends to encourage other misbehaviors or crimes. On the contrary, when we create an environment that we can be proud of, it will encourage others to act accordingly. So I will definitely be supporting this tonight. And I think this is a great, not a first step, but a great step towards cleaning up our downtown, pun fully intended. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also will be supporting this. And on numerous occasions, we've talked about our downtown, how we're going to develop it, how we're going to build it. And I've always said that we start from the downtown and work our way out. And one of the biggest things that we can do is to maintain a clean and orderly downtown area, so people will be interested in wanting to visit it. And as the mayor said, when people are driving down there, students are going to school, the last thing you want to see is this. I visit a lot of cities every time I tour around, and I go through a lot of spots. And one of the biggest complaints I have is their downtown garbage. And if we can get that done here, it'd be certainly a huge step forward. It's ironic that former Councillor Utley is not here tonight because he's going to be mentioned in another resolution later on tonight. So it's a shame he's not here, but you know what? This is a great proposition and I commend you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McCreary.
Well, thank you, Chair. You're doing a fine job so far. I can't imagine anybody not supporting this tonight. I'll be interested to see if someone does buck the trend, but I'm interested to learn how we'll be enforcing this. Will that be something BIA does or something City of Brantford does?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, we will be working with the BIA, but we will use our educational approach first before we go into enforcement. But that is something city will be working with the BIA.
So City of Brantford will provide enforcement?
That's right.
Okay. And what are the enforcement tools that we're able to bring to bear?
We do have through you, Mr. Chair, we do have the the solid waste bylaw that does give us the option to enforce through the bylaw. There are set out times in the bylaw, so we can use the bylaw language to enforce.
And so you'll be, with respect to your educational program, you'll also be educating people to the penalties associated with simply continuing the old practice of dumping it out the front door?
Through you, the chair, of course.
Yeah, good show. Thank you. I think this will go a long way to making the downtown something that we can all be proud of 24 hours a day, as opposed to some cases now where it was mentioned earlier that, you know, folks disgorging from their vehicles to go to a restaurant sometimes have to hurdle garbage bags. So yeah, I'm pleased to support this, and let us hope that it plays out the way that it appears as it may.
Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too will be supporting this and commend the mayor for bringing this forward. But the question I have is through you, Mr. Chair, to Selby. Selby, the green bin and the blue bin, will that be provided in the locked up area?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Councillor Sless, we will be having garbage yard containers, and as well as for the recycled materials, there will be totes, and as well as for organics, there will be green bin.
Okay, so there'll be the full complement of service then in the
Yes.
locked up area. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, my time to chime in. I too applaud the mayor for bringing this forward on a couple of notes. One, I don't know, a lot of people don't remember, back in 2012, we actually had a pedestrian fatality downtown with the garbage trucks collecting during the mid-morning. This alleviates that from ever having a possibility of happening again. The last thing you want to mix is big trucks with people walking around and cyclists. It's not a good recipe. Second of all, I know Councillor Carpenter's heart with the mullocks. There is also another option out there called earth bins. Mullocks tend to leak as you're dumping them because they're nets. Earth bins are solid containers and nothing dumped, and you don't need a specialty truck to service them. So I think that's something we should be looking at as well for staff to take some direction on. Thank you. Mayor Davis. Sorry, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought you saw me earlier, but I guess you didn't. The question through the staff, do we know how many Molox bins are being planned for the downtown?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Martin, we are at the early stages of a preliminary design on the downtown revitalization project. So I don't have the numbers to give it to you at this time, but we know this is a high priority in the design of the downtown. So we will know as we proceed further into the design.
Okay, and there'll be the 3 bins as well for garbage, green and
Recyclables, yes.
Okay. Sounds like a wonderful and once the temporary bins are in place, we'll stop doing bag pickup along the street?
We permanently, you mean? So once we have the permanent installation, that is the goal, is that once we have the permanent garbage bins and recyclables and organics installed, we won't have to do the collection anymore.
But when the bins go into the parking lot beside the expository building, will we stop?
No,
curbside
not
pickup
right
that
now.
way?
Through you, Chair, through you, Mr. Chair, we will continue to collect. So we will do the early morning collection, but we have to, because there is a residential customer still there in the downtown. So we do have to collect from the residential customers. So during this interim period, we will continue to give 6 days a week collection. But the idea is that this approach will eliminate setting a wrong set out of the bags and seeing the bags in the downtown at the after collection hours.
Would it not make more sense to allow the residential users to use the bins as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Martin, it is very difficult to control given that there is a big turnover of residents in that area. And both as well as the students and the residents, it is difficult to implement the program for residential customers.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor Davis.
Yeah, just in wrap up, as Councillor says, you mentioned, Mr. Chair, there's another advantage to this, and that is you're going to have our collector out there collecting the bags from prior to 9 a.m. when there are very few cars parked in the street downtown. There's very few pedestrians. And, you know, when they're out there at 10:30 and 11 o'clock, which they are now, and they're trying to collect the garbage and pick it up when there's cars parked and pedestrians, it is unsafe and it's inefficient. The garbage trucks, they actually block up the city streets. It's really not a very good situation. This will result in, I think, more efficient and more timely collection of the garbage in the downtown. They'll just simply be able to do their route that much faster. One thing I did want to say is that the last time that this was proposed, it wasn't successful because admittedly it creates some inconvenience for some downtown businesses. And that is because we're asking them to move from being able to take the garbage when they open their shop up at 10 a.m. and, you know, just put it on the street right outside their place of business. That's very convenient. I understand that. It's something that they're used to. But I think they have to accept that the end result is a situation that doesn't benefit anyone and reflects badly on the downtown and our city. And I'm hoping that they will take this in the spirit it's intended, that yes, it will be inconvenient for some. Some may have to change their business operations, but I hope they'll look at it as they're doing it in a positive way to help themselves and our downtown. And, you know, if we're going to make our downtown as successful as it can be, it means everybody's got to change a little bit and make some sacrifices and do things a bit differently. But I think the end result will be something we'll all be happy with.
Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah, I do have some concerns that we're going to be collecting 6 days a week still downtown. I'm wondering if there can't be a better option where we actually, we have a time limit when garbage bags can be put out. So you're still going to have residential bags put out. You're still going to have those that don't want to take them, walk a block with them or take them down the street. They may put them out as well. We talk about enforcement. If we're going to enforce businesses, but are we not going to deal with residential? Maybe we should be thinking about picking them up and having someone pick them up and take them to the bin as opposed to paying a truck or paying twice to have this work done. I'm not sure. There seems to be a better solution. But to your comment about Molochs, I was under this understanding that was the only option there was. I've never been a fan because it was the only option. There's only one contractor that did it. I don't like it when there's only one contractor. I like it when we get competitive bids. So since there's other options, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other hands, call the vote.
Thank you. Item 7.2 carried unanimously on a recorded vote of 11-0. All those voting in favor are Councillors Van Tilburg, Samuel Hunt, Carpenter McCurry, Martin Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Secoli, and Mayor Davis.
Councillor Scully, I believe you have the motion to place all separated items on the floor.
Allegedly. If I can find it.
It's on the screen.
There it is. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Caputo, that all items for consideration and consent separated for discussion purposes be approved.
Look at me. All right, we will now take up the separated items in the order that they appeared, starting with 6.1.1, as we had a presentation on it. Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to Hempson and staff. Very fulsome report. I had a lot of questions when I started it. A lot fewer when I was finished it, because it was well documented. A couple of questions. The DC credits, so there's an agreement for DC credits. Now, do the DC credits mean simply a dollar amount? So for example, if we redo, let's say a developer agrees to do some pre-work because they need their development to go forward, and we agree to an agreement and they have DC credits attached to it. Does that still allow us to make adjustments every 5 years in our development charges bylaw, which may increase the actual cost of individual development charges, which are paid or due when building permits? Will that still work, or will they get the credits based upon the time that they do the work and the DC charges at that point?
Yes, through the chair. It depends on how it's structured in the agreement. Most typically what happens is that a developer agrees to undertake a work. There's an estimate as to the cost of the work. Let's say it's $1 million to place a water main. And then there's a process whereby when the actual project cost is known and set after a tender or emplacement, then the project may be adjusted to reflect that. But it also is contingent on how it's been set out in the development charge background study. And then they would get eventually their credits equal to that cost, so that if the DC rates increased, their credits or the amount owing would get paid off faster, but they wouldn't get paid more than the cost of providing the work as agreed to by the city, if that answers the question.
Okay, so they would get the new credits at the new rate that they would have had to pay. But that still comes off that money till such time as they pay back, then they're paying that for any other lots, the current rates.
That's correct, yes.
All right, okay. Now, when we looked at direct costs, we looked at the actual indirect costs that when you talk about developing the fees? Do we look at our own costs to see if we're being as efficient as we possibly can, and how that compares with other municipalities?
So through the chair, we looked at the direct costs of everyone involved in the application process, and then the indirect costs were also captured in the analysis itself. And, it's obviously very difficult to compare the direct costs from place to place because the service levels in every municipality are different, but nothing stood out from a, review standpoint when we did the analysis that would cause a red flag, but there wasn't a service level comparison done as part of this.
And so the next step is for it to go out for some consultation and discussion about the fees and the program itself, and then come back to us for final approval?
We did some discussion and industry consultation through this process, and it's going through the reporting standpoint, and then obviously through the planning department if they have further consultation through their own mechanisms, and that's perfectly acceptable as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I first got on council, it was quite a fight for me to convince council that development charges should be raised up to the maximum we can charge so that growth pays for growth. Is there a reason why with this report, there's a recommendation to get to 80% instead of 100% cost recovery on some of these fees?
So through the chair, this is different from development charges. These are the planning application fees. So there is a little bit of different thought process where this isn't really a capital recovery. This is mostly an operating cost recovery on the planning application processes. And some of the applications themselves lend themselves to having a general benefit to the end user and a kind of a benefit to the city. And that's why the cost recovery target is not as high as 100%, but also it's partly because the city hasn't reviewed its fees for some time. So this is kind of a bit of an integral step to move towards cost recovery, but notwithstanding that, the city should continue to look at it at the next 3 to 5 year period to see if moving to that next stage of 100% cost recovery is something that's feasible.
Yeah, whether it's capital or operating,
Yeah.
still growth should pay for growth.
Mhm.
So I'd rather see 100% cost recovery on these fees so that the balance of the cost isn't passed on to the taxpayer through a property tax increase. So if we could bring back an option to do 100% recovery, I'd like to move that as an amendment when we get to council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When a developer is putting in the infrastructure that they require to proceed with their project, how are those contracts? Do they go out and negotiate with a company that does this, or is it done through our purchasing department? How is that handled?
Yes, through the chair to the counselor. In the policy that we've set forward, there's the requirements to follow the city's tendering process. So that if the developer is proceeding forward with undertaking the works, they still have to follow your normal processes in terms of letting out tenders and evaluating those. And so we've tried to maintain that integrity in the policy programming.
So things can't be built with a handshake and that doesn't happen then?
Correct. And the city always retains the right to make sure that the quality of the works is to the standards that you expect. So there's always that, we've built in the role of the city to approve all of those things, including the ultimate tender.
I think you answered my second question there, that the city oversees the installation of the services that are going in to make sure that they're to city spec.
Correct.
Okay. And then lastly, maybe I'm jumping the gun, but if there's a dispute, is there a resolution mechanism built in?
We don't have a formal dispute mechanism built in. It's the intention there is that the agreement will be quite specific in terms of what the credits and the provisions are. If a developer feels that they should be getting larger DC credits, there's a dispute mechanism under the Development Charges Act where they can file a complaint, which was first heard by council, and then if they're not satisfied with that response, would go to the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Thank you, Chair. You're doing an excellent job. I'm actually very impressed to see some of the questions that probably been asked over the last 5 or 6 years that I at least, if not more, from councilors about what our cost recoveries are and are we losing money every time we're doing these planning and the developments. So with these fees at 80% and climbing, I more or less concur with Councillor Martin in seeing it go to 100%. I mean, this isn't a city park or a recreational pool where there's a community benefit. This is a business, and there's money to be made from those entities, and they're gonna, at the end of the day, they're gonna make money privately, and we have to pay our way. So this actually supports what has been asked. What has the constituents been paying to put the difference? Because that's really who's holding the bag on this. If you could provide what the numbers would be like, the physical, how many millions or hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of difference this might make. If you have that handy now, that's great. But that's kind of what I'm hearing. And you know, how big is that gap that we need to close in an actual dollar figure? Thank you.
Mayor Davis.
Yeah, I would say through you, Mr. Chair, I don't agree that it should be 100% cost recovery. I mean, there is a benefit to the community as a whole that the timely processing of application fees, building permit fees, that sort of thing, that goes beyond, you know, growth, something being done for growth. I mean, a lot of this can be infill. It can be someone who's applying to sever their own lot, that they're not in the business of building or developing. I mean, there are quite a few applications we receive that would fall into that category. And so generally there is a benefit that the entire community derives from an efficient building permit development planning process. And so there should be, as there is with development charges, a component that is allocated to the community as a whole as a general benefit to the community. And I think doing it at 80-20, to me, that's a fair balance of those competing interests. But a couple of questions for our consultant, Mr. Binning. So when we determine the cost recovery, you start with what is the entire cost of say our building department or development engineering, and then when you figure out the per fee the per application fee, you then have to make an assumption about how many applications there are per year, right? That's an important determination when determining what the fee should be per application. So what assumptions did you make in terms of the volume of applications that you assume would be there for the various departments and upon which you base the recommended fee?
So through the chair, we made volume assumptions, particularly around obviously the number of applications, but rooted in through the revenue analysis of what the total quantum or total revenue that were perceived over each of the period or by each of the different fee categories. So for planning, it was let me just pull the number for you. About $1.4 million in revenue each year, which relates to the applications. And obviously it's done at the application level.
Right. So that's the average over 5 years or the average over?
Average annual over 5 years.
Okay. And the other, when I looked at your report, of course, we're always concerned, how do we compare with other municipalities? And I found it very hard to determine that from your report. I mean, you have a number of different municipalities, most of which are in the GTA. Typically we would see comparative municipalities in southwestern Ontario, like Chatham, Kent, Barrie, Guelph, London, Windsor, that sort of thing. I didn't see a lot of that. I was seeing municipalities that are north of Toronto, like Vaughan, et cetera. So, and the other comparison category we're used to seeing, we see it when we're doing our budget, is the average fee in the province of Ontario for municipalities that are medium to large, the average fee is X, and this is how you compare it to the average. Do we have that kind of data that we can do a more fulsome review of how we compare to other municipalities other than just the 4 or 5 you've used in your analysis?
So through the chair, the benchmarking that's in the report includes a series of communities from Guelph, inclusive of London, Windsor, and then through to some of the GTA communities as well. One of the caveats and the tough ones with planning fees in particular is that the fees get charged at sometimes different points, and they're not always apples to apples comparisons. And there depends on when engineering gets involved or legal, and sometimes they're charged separately, and there's variable rates, and particularly in Brantford versus others, communities have upper tier charges as well, and conservation authorities. So it's not as clean cut of a comparison per se as you might in some other kind of like a development charge comparison, for example.
Well, you do this across Ontario, do you not, for various municipalities?
We do this for other materials, yes.
All right. So how do you think generally we compare with these new rates? Will we be in the mid-range? Will we be the high mid-range and the high range? Just generally, how would you, if you're looking at it from a more kind of comprehensive basis rather than a specific comparison to the municipality, how generally will we compare to the, let's say, kind of the average?
Yeah, I would say for fast-growing municipalities, you're on the mid to higher range, and certainly the phase-in will help kind of bring you into that category over the period.
All right, thanks, Chair.
Not seeing any other hand. Oh, Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you. So is there, when we talk about the fees, because I have always agreed with Councilor Martin about development should pay for development. He wasn't alone in that argument, by the way. It was a regular argument, ongoing argument. In fact, we had to have our MPP in here to tell them how development charges actually work and what impact they have on housing and when they actually have the impact on the land, not the housing itself. A house sells for whatever the market rate sells for. And that's how it works. So is there an opportunity for us, for example, because my understanding is in the housing sector, we lose money on taxes for what the services cost. But intensification corridors or high-rise apartment buildings, that where we're building in areas where we already have infrastructure in place, is there ability for us to have charge less for that because we're going to gain more by that so we can encourage more development of infill and infrastructure? And is there an opportunity for us to look at the full cost for development for industrial and commercial places which pay a higher tax rate, which offset the tax rate for the residential rate to keep it down? It's a loaded question, I know.
Sorry, is the question related to the changes to the planning fees though, or as
Yeah,
a matter of development charges for?
Well, the planning
those
fees
funds?
first, all of it really, but the planning fees itself for what we get as the mayor talked about community benefit, but the community benefit is in intensification corridors or in industrial and commercial properties. So is there a way for us to look at those specifically and have a different rate for them as opposed to the 80 or 100%?
Yeah, so through the chair, sometimes if it might be in the center of corridors, doesn't always necessarily mean into a more streamlined application process. And we did it obviously a more of an average based approach, and some applications might take less time or more time relative to others, right? That doesn't mean through this, the city couldn't evaluate some form of policy or an amended fee or a discount for those if they wanted to incentivize or provide a further break to those types of developments.
Similar to a community improvement plan
Right.
bylaw.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Not seeing any other hands raised, we can call the vote.
Item 6.1.1 carried unanimously on a recorded vote of 11-0. All those voting in favor are Councilors Van Tilburg, Samwell Hunt, Carpenter, McCreary, Martin, Slash, Caputo, Sullivan, Sequoia, and Mayor Davis.
We will now move on to 6.1.3. This was separated by Councilor Scoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions and a few comments, and I see staff coming on up here. I do really appreciate having this update because I think this is something that we are so frequently asked about as counselors, is the transit optimization study. Nothing in this report, particularly in the public consultation piece, was particularly surprising. I think it's a very familiar rhetoric that we've been hearing as counselors, that individuals that reside in our city find the transit system currently to be a little bit infrequent, a little bit unreliable. So I'm really happy that we're taking these steps to move forward. So I've noticed when I'm out in my neighborhood, which is the Anderson Park neighborhood, out on my daily walks, when I turn on my situational awareness, I'm noticing a huge increase in usership out in West Brant. I'm seeing piles and piles of people, particularly Powell and Longboat. And I think that that can be attributed to a large amount of international students coming and renting in West Brant and having to take that bus into to their college programs. So I think it's almost a perfect storm because we also have relatively little amenities out in West Brant. So there's a lot of people looking to get from particularly the Winfield, New West Brant area into the city to get what they're looking for. So my question is there an ability for us to, or perhaps I'll plant the seed with you to look into increasing the frequency of the buses moving from West Brant into either the downtown core or into the north end of the city? Is that something that we could look at or that we will be looking at during this process?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Secoli. Yes to all of that. You know, I think one of the surprising things that we've seen out of here is the themes. And so it was a very balanced result. Kind of shocked us a little bit because of how well the community responded to it, including, you know, West Brant. You know, but they talked about affordability, they talked about speed, and they talked about convenience. And again, that includes the frequencies. I can tell you that Brantford Transit is over 500,000 riders up over pre-COVID numbers, and that is attributed to more and more people utilizing the bus. So I can tell you that part of the work that we're doing right now includes increasing frequency, including looking at how we can get people to where they're going.
And by the way, just to let you know, a lot of people from West Brant want to go to Northwest Industrial. We learned that as well. So
Yeah, that's fabulous.
again, very, very happy with the results, very happy with what we're hearing. And now staff, we're doing the hard work with the consulting team to put together a very bold plan for council to consider.
It's perfect. And on the topic of ease of use, this goes out to my daughter Haley, who has been complaining that we don't have the Presto pass, or I guess it's an app that she uses in Toronto or when she's in Hamilton. So I think that it would be fabulous if someone who lives in Brantford could just have that Presto app and be able to fluidly move between surrounding communities. You know, someone uses our city bus to get to the Via Rail to get to Toronto, and it's all just really, there's some, lacking the word right now, but they're able to use the same app throughout all of the different communities. So I will plant that seed and push for that. I think there's some benefit to the Presto app. Now, my last question, transit is a priority topic on our joint services committee. And I see here that some in the public consultation, people are asking for a way to commute between Brantford and say Paris. Is that something that you're able to look at through this optimization study, or do you need council direction to review that more deeply, or would it come from the joint services? Can you point me in the right direction with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are working with county staff right now, and we have looked at two opportunities that I think we heard not only from the optimization, but also what we've been hearing for years is that people would like to be able to travel to and from Brantford to Paris, and the other one is Cairnsville. So we are working with county staff right now to look at what that looks like, how we would do a transfer agreement, how we would pull that off so that it would be seamless for people to be able to use the service.
That's great. Thank you so much for this update. It'll help all of us when we're chatting with residents about it. And of course, you're always one step ahead of everything that I'm bringing forward. So thank you so much for your hard work.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I see you got Cairnsville on the list, and you've got the Johnson Road on the list for service, and Corbin Street East for service. But I have to ask you a question. Recently, the Cairnsville buses were canceled, and the ward councils weren't made aware of that. Or they were changed, but the residents were calling us, Councillor Hunt and I, regularly saying, why is there no bus service here anymore? So I see you're surprised at that, but maybe you can send me a quick email about what happened there, what went wrong there. Secondly, when we're looking at transit services, and let me give you an example. Henry Street, for example, the apartment building is on the north side of Henry Street, but the bus goes up the south side of Henry Street. So as a city, we put a pedestrian crosswalk there just so the people that need the bus can go across that street. The pedestrian crosswalk was rather expensive, and a pedestrian shelter, as opposed to having the bus just go the other way, picking up. So are we going to look at where the actual customers are when we look at sort of apartment buildings and so forth?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Carpenter. Yes, that is definitely part of what we're looking at. Opportunities to be able to provide two-way service on some of the major arterials and collectors is a priority for us. And we have heard through the survey some frustration from our customers and our clients in regards to, why do I have to cross the road? Why is it on that side of the street? And so, in some cases that may make sense depending upon, what part of the city. But where we're looking in industrial areas, and again, Henry Street and the Bernada, is that's been underserviced for years. So I think we've got to take a really, really good look at how we provide the service and what that service looks like. We've got to get away from the traditional loop and hub and spoke. And this is the way we've always done it. And so we're definitely doing that. And what side of the street we're picking up and dropping off is definitely one of the things that we're encountering through this.
And you talked about the increased half a million ridership. And I know it's not just West Brant, it's all over the city, actually. I've noticed it at bus stops, 10, 12 individuals waiting for a bus stop, pretty regular at a lot of bus stops. In fact, I've seen most bus stops. I don't recall seeing a bus stop where someone wasn't waiting for a bus. So we do have a lot of increased users, so that's a good thing. And I like the idea that you're getting rid of the, you know, we don't have to operate on a spoke system anymore. We need to operate on maybe a spoke and grid. I don't know what that looks like, and I'm sure the optimization study will point that out. I just want to tell my colleagues around the table that I wrote one letter to the editor in all my political career because I didn't think it was fair because I already have a venue right here. But I wrote a letter to the editor in 1990. I'd be happy to share it with you. And it was about transit. When I was on the Public Utilities Commission, I introduced a monthly bus pass. And I was shot down and I was very disappointed. So I went home on my Commodore 64 and I typed up a letter to the editor that was so long that it ended up being in the insight page in the expositor, and it took up a page and a half. And then the Public Utilities Commission had to have a special meeting that didn't include me to discuss what they were going to do with this rogue Commissioner Carpenter, who made his comments known about why transit was failing us. Back in those days, the ridership went down, we reduced the routes, and of course the ridership went down, and we reduced the routes and the ridership went down. As opposed, ridership going up is a good thing right now. We need to invest the money to keep that ridership and improve services. But then back in that day when it was commissioned, it was the city hall and councils of the day that restricted our budget because the money came we ran transit and water in hydro, and it wasn't easy getting the funds. But anyway, any council member would like a copy of that, I still have a copy of that email. I think you'll find it quite interesting. My only email. So I've always been a supporter of transit. I did provide it to the Urban Transit Authority local because I wanted them to have it at their annual meetings to know that I've always been a supporter of transit, and I think it's the right thing to do. So thank you for the study and thank you for the direction you're going. Yeah, and the citizens are very excited about this. So as council, we've got to put some money to this when it comes final to make sure we have a good system. Thank you.
Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the synopsis is that we need to invest in a few more buses to get everything going. So I agree with that. Question, Mr. Spicer, there's no one nicer. I've heard that somewhere. I do have
I
three
think I told
questions,
you
but I
that, didn't
think, I think you did. So I do have three questions for you, if you can, please. What's the current bus schedule to the Northwest Industrial Park? Is it hourly or half hour?
So currently, today, it is a shuttle service. What we're predicting, or what we're projecting, sorry, for April is to run a regular route. So it would be a brand new route called the Route 10 NWIA. And I can get Brad Smith, who is our transit planner, to give you a little bit more detail on what that route would look like.
Good evening, Brad Smith. I'm the transit planner here. So the new Route 10 NWIA is scheduled to start this April. It's going to be heading up that way into the Northwest Industrial area down Hardy Road. It's now going to be dipping down into the new residential area up there as well, and still going around through the regular stops that are there. So we're not removing any stops. We're going to be increasing the service up there. It'll be running every 45 minutes. The current service up there runs a few times a day. So it'll run for a couple hours in the morning, a couple hours in the afternoon. It'll now be a full day service. Starting at 6 in the morning, and it'll run till 10:30 in the evening every 45 minutes, hitting both the industrial as well as the residential area there.
Okay, what about after 11? Like, there's a lot of people that are working out there, whether it be Ferraro, whether it be Gazet, so if we're going out every 45 minutes, if it's not shuttling out there, how do those people get back and forth?
Through the chair, excellent question. So after the 10:30 bus, actually starting at 9 o'clock, there is a bus number 11 that goes out there on the hourly, and that's within our current service. So that starts at 9 o'clock. So there'll be a bit of an overlap between the two services out there, giving increased service between 9 o'clock and 10:30, which is where we see a bit of a bulge out there in terms of our ridership.
Now, I guess my next question, and we've talked about this, what would be the cost to go out every half hour? And the only reason I'm asking that is if I was a shift worker off tonight at 11 o'clock and I don't make the bus for say 11:15 pickup time, I'm waiting now till 12:15 to pick up the bus. It's pretty hard on somebody that's working probably in West Brand if they're commuting back and forth.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you could give us a little bit of time, we can have that to you shortly. What we've been able to do with this change in April is within our current budget and our current funding envelope. We've been able to work with our staff and our operators to shift some things around in order to be able to do that. To actually provide that, we can work on and get you more detailed information before council if that works for you.
That's fine, perfect. Number two, With the Everbridge construction that's happening, how are we gonna maneuver around that to get people into the Northwest Industrial Park? Which losing opportunity to get from the downtown core to the other side of the bridge to Hardy Road is certainly gonna cause some issues. So just get some insight on that.
So through the chair to the councillor, we were able to work with our engineering services department to look at the detours in that area to help find a solution that kind of minimizes the hurt there. So it impacts two of our routes, in particular our route number 8 and our NWIA route, which is our new route. So our route number 8 will actually detour kind of to the north side of that, going up towards the hospital and going down Terrace Hill. And the NWIA route coming back will actually go to the south side there and go through the north part of Homedale neighborhood and back onto its regular route. Because of the detour will coincide with the changes to the NWIA, so we're able to build that time in, so we aren't going to see any buses running late. They're going to run on the new time. We'll be able to evaluate that throughout as well and see if what we can do once those detours are removed. We're also going to be putting in some temporary bus stops to as close as we can there to help alleviate anything that's removed. We do have 2 bus stops that are going to be kind of caught in the crossfire of the detour and are going to have to be removed. But well, like I said, we'll try and bookend those with some other temporary stops.
Thank you. And
Councillor
finally,
Caputo, would you like to go back in queue? Your 4 minutes is up. Please. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, gentlemen. Long overdue. Glad we're doing this. It's time we look at how we get people around the city and get the buses moving around the city. I think it's very timely and again, I think probably overdue. Who took this survey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, 710 people responded to
Random
the survey.
people?
510 are conventional users, 24 were Brantford Lyft customers, and 170 were non-users.
That explains why half the people can only get around using the bus. I was looking at the charts and wondering how, it sounds like half the people in the city don't have cars. And I thought that isn't right, because we have trouble keeping the roads going. And then their main transportation, yeah, it was 60% of people. Their main way of getting around town is using a bus. And I thought, well, that's not a random survey then, that's users talking to you for the most part.
That's correct.
Okay, that explains why the numbers seemed so far out of whack to me. There was a noted in here, folks not feeling safe waiting at shelters. How do we deal with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, bus stop placement is an important piece as part of the community. What we are doing is we are looking at relocating a bunch of our bus stops and ensuring that they're in well-lit areas, that they're not out in the middle of somewhere that people feel trapped. So we are looking at ways of making sure that where we are, even hubs, we're looking at places that can be deemed safe, where there's a chance that there's going to be more than one person standing there. And time of day, we do offer an after dark service where we can pick up and drop off people wherever they like, as long as it's on the route. We can't turn down their street and drop them off at home, but we are looking at that program as well, and how do we enhance that? And what do we look for in the design of a bus stop? Making sure it's in a well-lit area, making sure it's in a well-used area, and where we're, like, if I can use Hardy Road as an example, there's not a lot of action there. So do we really need a bus stop there? And if we do, what type of bus stop would we put there? And what would we like there? Would we like more lighting, or is there another place we can put it? So passenger safety is certainly on our list when we're looking at bus stop location.
Okay, good. Then in a lot of cities, they're energized, the shelters, and they'll have messages in there, like next bus arriving 7 minutes, next bus arriving, whatever, bus number, all of that information is fed to the consumer. Have we looked at that, or is that expensive to implement?
Through you, Mr. Chair, currently it's not on our radar to do real-time information through those types of means, but we will be reinvesting in our mobile app, so that people would be able to understand when the bus is arriving, And they'd be able to use their mobile phones to determine that. That would be something that we definitely will look at in future years, but we're just prioritizing
Yeah.
what it is we want to spend money on.
Well, money's always an impediment, eh? The Northwest, when we're looking at routes and times and those side, do we do a lot of consultation with the industries? And to make sure that we're kind of matching up our routes with their shifts and that type of exchange of information?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we did reach out to area employers, not only in the Northwest, but also in Grenada. Invited them to a public information center with our consultants, and we didn't get a lot of response for that. And I think part of the reason that we didn't get that is because we really got information about shifts and all that other stuff, but they weren't sure what we were asking of them. So our plan now is to re-engage by working with our economic development people to actually go out there with what the plan looks like and see if it meets the needs and then make an adjustment there. So if everybody worked 8 to 4 or 4 to 12 or 12 to 8, life would be wonderful. But out there, it is very challenging to try and pick, where we would put the service. But we are prioritizing right now on the information that we do have. But the future growth and the way that the Northwest is exploding, we've got to stay on top of this. And so economic development is working closely with our staff to help us with that, so we can try and get ahead of it rather than play catch up like we're doing now.
Thank you. Councillor Celeste, would you like to go back in queue?
Yes, please. I got one more.
Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I think this is a great success story because historically and in several decades ago, transit was viewed by both councils and the community generally as kind of a burden that the municipal act and the province forced on us. And, who took the transit, and you'd often receive most of your comments about transit when you're elected official would be, what are we doing about those empty buses? We need fewer buses. We're wasting money on transit. We can spend money elsewhere. And the success story is, of course, the demand and the need and the wish and the want for transit service has increased exponentially. I think reflecting the growth in our community and the change in the nature of our community. And now I think we've reached the point where transit is seen, certainly by the elected officials, as one of our top priorities, improving the transit system, but I think also by the community as a very valuable service that the municipality provides, and a wish on the part of the community to see that it improve. And I think that is long overdue, because although we've had the demand for transit undergo a revolution almost of sorts in Brantford, our basic system hasn't. As you said, the Spicer, the hub and spoke system. And so it's great to hear that this survey, I believe, will be the foundation for the transformation of how we actually deliver transit service in our community and improving it substantially. And also, what a success story that in other communities since the end of the pandemic, you've heard how many communities have struggled to get their ridership back up to where it was pre-COVID. And we're doing better than we ever have, and for a number of different reasons. We're very lucky to have a director of our transit services who's worked in the field of transit for 25 years, Mr. Spicer, at least, all across Canada in various communities. You've been involved, I'm sure, in many surveys like this. You're nodding your head, so I guess you're agreeing with me. So can you tell us, is this survey kind of typical of what you see, or is it different than any survey you've been involved in before? And in what way is it different? And thirdly, what do you see as the 3 basic themes from the survey that you're going to carry into the rework and the transformation of our current system?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mayor Davis, that's a great question because, when we first got into the survey, I really wasn't sure what to expect. And I was pleasantly surprised on the response from the community. We heard from a lot of our users that why would I fill out a survey? You're not going to do anything anyway, because we've done this before. And then what we heard from our customers was, wow, what a great survey. And the survey was designed to not guide people down a path, but to allow people to express themselves in in the way that means most to them. And we use the terminology of, transit's always been one to tell people the routes and where they're going to go and how they're going to travel. This for me was eye-opening, that we actually heard from our customers what we should be listening to, and that is where our customers are traveling from and what destinations are important to them in the community. And in the years that I've been involved in this, this has probably been the best response that I have seen, and the type of responses and the type of time that our customers and our community took to provide us that feedback is just, it's mind blowing. It was very, very good, which again is part of the reason why we're actually dissecting this and looking at how can we make this service meet the community's needs. And again, we've heard it many, many times, and communities heard it many times, is that speed, convenience, affordability, those are the three keys. And that's something that we often hear as well. But the very, very strong influence of this community actually wants a transit system that they can support and that they can utilize. And are we ever going to compete against the automobile? I think that's a stretch, but I think if we can build our transit system so it's convenient for all of our residents to use it as an option, then I think if we can reach that plateau, then I think we're on the right track. And with the fact that we're growing in interregional connections and that opportunity, the timing of this has come together at a very good time. So yes, very, very, and I'm not just saying that because Brantford is my favorite city, but I am saying that the community really embraced this, and we heard some very positive things.
Would you like to go back in queue, Mayor Davis? Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Historically, transit's got 1/3 of its cost from the fare box. Will the increase in ridership allow you to maintain that ratio?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think that the goal of what we're trying to do is frequency drives ridership. And so if we have good frequency, if we have good routing, then we'll see the ridership grow. 1/3 of the revenue to cost ratio is not something that staff are happy with. We would like to see that grow. And again, that allows us then to provide more supports and more opportunities within. So we're not happy from a staff level of where we're at in regards to our fare collection, but I do think that as we look through the fare strategy and we look at the routing and we look at the frequency, I think that that's going to be a very quick opportunity for us to see some improvement. So longer term, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor McCreary.
Chair, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spicer. I don't have the poetic skills as rhyming Caputo, so I can't make another rhyme for your name come into my head, I'm afraid. But I want to thank you for all the work you've done to date. And this really is it's a watershed sort of a survey and study. And I think if I read between the lines, we're headed in a slightly different direction. Us, like it was said earlier, taken somewhat of the imagination of folks in terms of how to get around. There was a time when we used to run buses mostly empty. And I remember a time when the bus salesman picked me up at my house to try and win me over to buy their buses. And he said, and here's perhaps the best selling point. He said, we tint the windows. And I said, why would you do that? And he said, so the taxpayers can't see in, inferring that our buses ran mostly empty. And that may not have been the case, but it spoke a lot, I think, to some of the attitudes of the time. I think back to when I lived in Toronto, and I didn't, all the transit didn't end up at Union Station. I could get on the King Street car, get on the subway and go down and get the train, come home. But for a lot of years, our transfer points have been few and far between. In the old days, of course, you had to go to Market Square, and the buses would all come at the same time, and you'd go off in different directions. And I think that maybe that's a direction that we're headed as well, where there's more flexibility in terms of being able to get on a bus and get to a destination same day. I want to thank you for the opportunity to meet with you and the consultant. That was most illuminating. And I think probably I would have to think that all members of council availed themselves of that opportunity. And I would like to think that each of us has something in the way of a point that we can look through this report and say, yeah, we talked about that. And that will happen. And I'd be remiss since I mentioned poet Caputo and not mentioning writer Carpenter, and I'm hoping for an autographed copy of that missive from 1990.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, and through you to Mike. Good job on the report. I spent a significant amount of time giving my feedback for both you and the consultant. So what we're looking at is what Brantford Transit is moving forward. Councillor Carpenter alluded to a concern that we had in terms of what is the, so we're looking at changing routes, but we're kind of doing that right now. We're removing stops. And so I'd like to get a clearer picture of the process of, what's the rationale for removing a stop and who do we consult with? And a request that the ward councillors at least be advised versus getting a phone call or an email from a constituent that now has to walk down. In fact, it wasn't even our constituent, it was actually a Ward 5 constituent that now has to walk from the apartment building on Linwood to Colburn Street to catch a bus. So I think it's the process in terms of how do we decide to remove a stop? And then the flip side of that is how do we decide to add a stop? So what, if you can give me your view on how that process works.
So what I'll do is I can start it off and then I'm going to ask Jerry to comment on that as the operations manager. But I can tell you that we have been tweaking with the system since I arrived, actually a year today permanently, but a year and a half now. We've been tweaking with the system because we're struggling with loads and we're struggling with timings. And especially on the Echo Place route, that's definitely one of our higher use. And we get an awful lot of complaints about buses running late. So what we did was we looked at bus stops that were not used as often as others, and we tried to group that in within a reasonable walking distance so that we would ask people if they wouldn't mind walking another 100 meters, 150 meters to that bus stop so that we weren't stopping numerous times along the route. That slows us down. So we looked at that, and again, the consultation piece is that we didn't reach out and ask, which again, we can take that under advisement. But what we did was we did reach out to say that we're making these changes with the stops. And again, Jerry, I'm not sure if we heard a lot of feedback. We have heard from some individuals, but it's just on a temporary basis. So I think part of the outreach for the next phase of our consultation will be to include that our bus stop spacing, our bus stop placement, walking distance to and from as the crow flies or within the city blocks. So Jerry, if you just want to comment a little on that.
Sure, thank you. Jerry McElhone, Manager of Transit Operations, no rhyme with that, but through the chair. So we get a lot of feedback from our operators, our staff. And so when we're looking at a route in terms of reliability, their customers tell them they're very vocal about, it's tough to run this route on time. So we concentrate on reliability. What can we do as a system to allow them to operate better? So the way that we look at stops is, again, we go to the operator and say, well, are you picking up at these stops? And some of them are placed relatively close together. We heard the councillor talk earlier about one that's across the street. So that's the information that we gather, and then we would put it up as a temporary closure and really see if there's any feedback. So again, if somebody walks down there once every 3 months and says, I'm used to this stop, but it's not here, that could happen. But we're taking your information under advisement. I guess two other things I'd like to say. One is that I'm also very excited to hear your excitement, because this is really a tremendous project and a tremendous opportunity. And one of the things that we've talked about as staff is that what we have right now is a transit system. That's what we have. We go here and we circle around and come back. But what we're going to have is a transit network. This is a network that's going to work together. This is going to allow people to get from where they want to start to where they want to end up. And we know that information. So I'm very excited as well, and thanks for the opportunity.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Well, it's nice to hear everybody chiming in on buses and the positivity towards them. Bus usage has always been very strong in Ward 5, and unfortunately, not always the case in the other wards. And so there was always some pushback, but I do know Ward 1 and Ward 5 always had strong usage. It was former Councillor Rick Weaver that helped initiate changes to our bus systems and a plan. Obviously, that plan got stretched from 5 years to 10 years with the same money. But here we are anyways, and we're in the spot that we thought we would be in, and that is significant usage of our buses. But I do want to comment on what Councillor Hunt and Councillor Carpenter have mentioned regarding, and this is not like, we have this a number of times where a shelter or stop has been ended and really without consulting those that have been using it. And when you say that, oh, we didn't get much use out of it, well, I'll tell you that usage for the person that's going there, it's very important to them. And sometimes you also don't know the physical status of the person that's walking to those stops. Sometimes they're seniors, and that's all the energy they got is to get that stop that's been close by. So, I mean, that's important. The other question I have is along the lines of when you state that it's not a stop that's in use. Well, if it's not a stop that's really in use, aren't you driving by it anyways? And therefore, how are you losing time? And if it is a jaunt and a jig, say you've taken one off that turns a corner. Well, we're doing other things in the city and adding slower speeds, speed bumps, and things like that to slow down the buses. How are you compensating for those changes? Because for me, one stop is only a few, 15, 20 seconds, but you can lose a couple minutes, a minute every time we take a street and move it down from 50K to 40 or even lower at times. So how do you compensate for that? Is it with more buses?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Van Tilburg. A lot of questions, but I can tell you that one of the issues that we've been struggling with as being a transit system is that we didn't really have any rhyme or reason as to what bus stops meant and what their locations were and what the walking distance to the bus stop and what the bus stop placement is, which is why we're in the confusion that we're in now. You will see as part of the optimization a very balanced approach to bus stop locations, distance, walking, and spacing, because every time, if we stop at a bus stop for one person or we stop at a bus stop for 10 people, by the time we actually get back up to speed, you're probably 3 minutes down. Now, if we have a bunch of people, then that's even more. So, and at various times of the day, some bus stops are being used more than others. And so what we did was we looked at areas where the impact would be less than if we just took them out. We tried to find them that bus stops that were so close together that people would have to walk a little bit. So we've heard loud and clear tonight that we need to do better in the engagement piece of what the bus stop location will be. But I also want to tell you that bus stops are going to be a very important part of this study, and where individuals would like bus stops or amenities, shelters, benches, there's going to be a policy that goes around that so that the community knows what to expect and our customers know what to expect. Far too often in this business, we've been asked to put bus stops because Mrs. So-and-so called or Mr. So-and-so called, and we've put bus stops there. And that's been the detriment of our system. And, we're currently operating at a very, very slow speed, and we're struggling with our stop distances, but we're also struggling with vehicular traffic. And so part of this study that we're moving forward to takes that into consideration. And you will see that we will be asking for more resources to help alleviate that, which is not the most optimization way to do things. But until we find that balance of bus stops and locations, we're going to have to put some more resources at it in order to keep our buses on time. So It is I like to call it, it's almost algebra, which by the way, I hated when I did algebra. But at the same time, we're trying to find that balance. And, you know, the outreach to the community, we learned that we've not done a good job over the year of talking to our customers and our community. So we will through this change that, and we will try and be a little bit more cognizant of what the community's needs are before we make decisions like that.
Well, thank you.
And before we move to second time speakers, I got two questions for you. One's going to surprise you. First, have we had any thought on a time of day express lines? Kind of like a B line or an A line like they're running in Hamilton to get you from the east to west, as opposed to just extensions and whatnot?
Oh, I just love to hear that type of talk. Yes, but we're not ready for it here in Brantford. I do think that somewhere down the road, it is something that we're going to have to look at, but we've got some major traffic congestion problems that no matter what we do, unless we look at transit priority as an opportunity, we're not going to be able to compete. So although, you know, if we ever get to transit only lanes or we get to queue jumps or we get to that type of stuff, then absolutely something that I've told our consulting group that I would really like us to go, but that's somewhere down the road. So it didn't surprise me because we're on the right track.
No, here comes the surprise.
Oh,
You mentioned the app. Now, a problem that we're experiencing in West Brant is the bus is early. So they call the number says the bus is going to be there in 5 minutes. They get there with 4 minutes to spare because they're around the corner and the bus has already gone by. Is the app going to fix that as well? Or are we going to somehow control the buses from going ahead of schedule?
through you, Mr. Chair, you know, full transparency, the app that we're currently using isn't the most optimist app, so we're going to improve on that. One of the things that we try to say to our customers is that, you know, we can tell you when the bus will arrive, but at the same time, there could be certain things that happen. We hit every red light, we don't get slowed down, we don't pick up people, and so we could be running a little bit early, but you know, that window is, you know, you don't want to run any earlier than 3 minutes, really. So part of this will ensure that we've got consistency in the service that we deliver and that our timing of our routes is as accurate as it can be. And that when stuff like that happens, we're able to respond to it quickly. But you're definitely onto one of the many things that we heard through our outreach.
Awesome. Thank you. Councillor Caputo, second time.
Sorry, I thought I left instructions before I left for a sec. So, couple more questions. We had conversations once about seniors price program. Is there anything we could look at to revisit? I knew it had issues with Brantford Lift, but is there something we could look at? Doesn't have to come in another report, but somewhere down the line, looking at opportunities for seniors, and what we proposed at one point was free, but certainly couldn't work it that way. But is there something like a rewards program or something that we could put together?
Through Mr. Chair to Councillor Caputo, the FAIR strategy that is part of the optimization study will be able to look at that and provide you with all of the options. We are looking at, affordability was one of the strong keys that we heard back. So we are looking at various options to make sure that we are competitive, make sure that we are affordable, and make sure that the access is there. So there will be a number of options for us to consider through that FAIR strategy as part of the optimization. So fair to say, you'll have another kick at it when we bring the final report.
Okay, and I guess, is there any future thought of actually putting high school students on a bus like they do in other metropolitan areas such as Toronto, Hamilton, anything along those lines? With having less school buses on the road and at the same time probably increased ridership with a gas tax rebate coming to us?
I'll let Jerry handle this one.
Thank you. Through the chair, we have a lot of high school students on the bus right now. So we work with the school boards and the school bus consortiums. It's a very interesting group, and it's a heavy demand, obviously, at bell times in the morning and in the afternoon, but we're actively pursuing that group, and we have a lot of riders from high schools.
And Jerry, I don't have a rhyme for your name, but I'll stick a vowel at the end, just made you Italian. How's that sound?
So close to St. Patrick's Day. I appreciate that.
Mayor Davis.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Spicer. I'm going to give you some real-time experience with the transit system. Since I last spoke, I realized, my truck was in for servicing. I didn't get it back because I needed to keep it overnight. I knew probably I can't rely on any of my fellow council members to drive me home. And I'm thinking, I can take Brantford Transit home. I'm being serious, okay? And so I thought, okay, I'm going to check the app. I knew I was on Route 9 because I live at Echo Place. I got the route right, did I not? Yeah, I did, okay. And I gotta say, it's taken me like 10, 15 minutes to figure, like, I'm not being negative here. I'm just giving you some real-time feedback. I mean, this app is hard to use, right? If you're not familiar with how to use it. And I'm glad to hear that one of the priorities is going to be to make this a lot user-friendly, especially for those that don't use the transit regularly, which I'll admit I don't. But you know, if we're going to capture that those in our community that have not used transit before and they want to give it a try, their first intro is going to be this app, and we definitely have to improve it. But I did figure it out after 10 to 15 minutes. It's not hard with the terminal right over here behind City Hall. It's on the hour, right? And the last bus is 11. I got that right? Good. So if this meeting goes beyond 11, I guess I'm going to be, you know, SOL, have to walk home. Anyways, hope we can improve that up.
Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you. The elephant in the room, where's the money coming from if we're going to increase the service? Because I've heard you say that the Northwest route you had to take from another area. So we're just robbing from Peter to pay Paul. To make the routes better, we're going to have to increase the service. And to increase service, that's going to cost some money. You haven't asked for any money yet. We've already passed a 4-year budget. Where will the point come where we have to actually, we got to put some rubber to the road, excuse the pun, it's appropriate, but we got to put money towards this.
Through Mr. Chair, and again, Councilor Carpenter, one of the parts of this is determining what the needs are and what the cost to do that. So I think I've mentioned that this is going to be a very bold plan. And it will be something that will completely change the transportation network in Brantford, and we're going to look at things differently. I'll be honest with you, there will be some significant investment required. But what we're trying to do right now is come up with a fiscal approach that makes sense. So, you know, would we be buying X number of buses in year 1, 2, or 3? I'm not sure yet. But that will be an option. So what we're trying to do with the final report is to come back with a fiscally responsible plan that takes part of the fare that comes in, part of our gas tax money, part of our ability to get some grants, and throw that into the equation, and then say, what we want to be able to do is if we hit this plateau, then this is the next step, and the next step costs X number of dollars. So we're not going to come back with a report that says we need to buy 20 buses and we need to hire 40 staff, and you know, we're behind the times, although we are behind the times, but we're not going to expect us to catch up in 1 year, not even 2 years. So there will be a full financial report coming with the optimization study that will explain increased frequency. So increased frequency means more buses. Increased frequency means more staff. Increased frequency means more amenities. So yes, there will be that comes, and why you didn't see anything at budget time was because we didn't really have at that time a really good grasp on what it was going to look like. And I didn't want to come at that time and say, well, hoping that we're going to be able to hit this point. It's becoming clear. We met today with the consulting group and staff, and we went over what the frequencies mean and how many more staff we would need, how many more buses we would need. And so that will be part of the final report. And I will tell you, you're going to hear this from me many, many times. This is very, very bold. But we are creating a network here. We're not creating a transit system. So hopefully you will be very happy with the work that has been done. but I think the community will respond well to what we're going to come up with. And I think the community will be able to use the system and be able to rely on it more and be able to trust it and be able to trust that they can move through the community and that we'd never want to leave Mayor Davis stranded at home again.
Well, and I raised that because I think you have since the beginning of when Rick Weaver first started moving us towards transit. And I think this council is probably one of the more pro transit councils I've been on in a long time from what I'm hearing from members of council. So this is the opportune time to do those things. One final comment would be, we hear from residents at time, well, why do you run those big 40-foot limousines or buses, they call them, I like to call them limousines, 40-foot buses when they're not full, and they wanted us to buy smaller buses. And the reality is the biggest expense is labor. And smaller buses would mean on busy times, you'd have to have twice as many manpower, as opposed, or you're going to manage two fleets. That's the answer to that question when public asks it. So it's very simple. Sometimes the buses are empty, but most times they're full, especially now.
And if I can, Councillor Carpenter, through you, Mr. Chair, the cost of a 30-foot bus is very similar to a 40-foot bus and the capacity on a 40-foot bus. I will tell you that we are looking at all options right now in regards to types of buses, from 30-footers to 60-footers. Which is something I never thought we would be able to look at, but we are looking at that. We're also looking at used inventory, the electrification strategy as well. That plays a big part in this. And so, we're looking at, we're uncovering as much as we can in regards to providing council with the options to make this rollout very, very successful.
Stop by any from California, please. And thank you. Thanks very much, Mike.
Okay, one further comment on my part. Oh, Councilor McCurry. Okay. Further to Councilor Caputo's point about the seniors, I think we should really definitely look at finding a way to get them more involved on the buses at a lower rate. If not, if we can do free, then free would be, because there's so many benefits that can come from that. First of all, there's a lot of seniors out there because of affordability issues are stuck on the 4-block circumference of their home. If we can get them onto the buses, they're going to get out. They buy a cup of coffee, they're stimulating the economy. More importantly, they're getting out and they're not visiting ERs from being stuck in the 4-block surroundings of their home. So I think we really need to visit that.
And if I can just respond to that, and that's a very valid point. We are working within the city where we're looking at affordability and we're looking at low income type programs, which is something we don't have in place right now. And so we want to make sure that the transit system is affordable for all and accessible for all. And so, free, I'm not sure, somebody has to pay, right, for that. But if we can make our system affordable and we can make it work for the taxpayer and work for the number of fares that we have, then as long as it's affordable and accessible, I think we can reach that target. And if that means that we have to look at severely discounted programs in order to provide that access, then that will be a decision that council will guide us to make.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilor McCurry.
Chair, thank you, Mr. Spicer. A hypothetical case for you, sir. If the mayor were able to figure out how to find a bus stop using his phone and the times and schedules, how then could the mayor pay for his bus trip? Hypothetically, of course.
Are you talking today,
And
Councilor?
I'm not just talking about this mayor, I'm talking about any mayor on riding our transit system.
So as of today, in today's world, it's very difficult. So the mayor, if he didn't have a B card, he'd have to pay cash. As we move into the new fare collection system, which we're hoping to make some announcements very soon as to where we're going to launch that, we'll have a mobile app. And we'll also have the ability for people to be able to have a smart card. So more access. So for example, if you want to pay by credit card, you can buy a mobile ticket and access the bus to be able to do that. If you want to buy a smart card, you can load it online, which makes it more convenient than today. So as part of our new fare collection system, there will be more access and it will be easier. We'll also be able to work with our universities to be able to allow for their cards now to be part of our fare collection system. So it's a tap and not a visual. So today, the mayor would have been forced to pay the cash fare. Very, very, very soon down the road, he'll be able to buy a discounted ticket on a mobile app and have full access to our system.
And of course, the mayor would probably qualify for the seniors discount.
I'm not going to comment on that, Councillor Carpenter.
Okay, not seeing any further hands raised, can call the vote.
Thank you. The Brantford Transit Resolution carried on a recorded vote of 11-0. All those voting in favor are Councilors Van Tilburg, Samwell, Hunt, Carpenter, McCurry, Martin, Sless, Caputo, Sullivan, Secoli, and Mayor Davis.
Okay, that brings us to 6.1.6, Councillor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this intimate partner and gender-based violence community action plan, for the sake of the viewers at home, this is an action plan that comes as a result of a resolution that was brought forward last year that declared intimate partner and gender-based violence an epidemic in the city of Brantford. So this action plan has been reviewed and endorsed by 6 organizations within our community. So the Indigenous Victim Services, Nova Vita, the Sexual Assault Center, the Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Care Team, Victim Services Brant, and Willow Bridge. So huge thank you to staff. Brooke Papel works so hard and she's such an amazing advocate for us. And it really shows in the actionable steps that were put together in this plan. And I also want to shout out BRAVE, which is Brant's Response to Violence Everywhere, our BRAVE committee, who will be responsible for mobilizing on the actionable steps that we've put together. In 2018, Brantford had the highest police reported cases of intimate partner violence. And since then, we've remained in the top 5 in Ontario. Yet sadly, this report indicates that we have a funding shortfall. We have a gap of nearly $2 million a year to properly provide the resources to everyone who is a victim of intimate partner or gender-based violence. So the city of Brantford made a commitment to help, and some pretty powerful action steps came from some stakeholder consultations that were held. We had 25 organizations contribute to finding solutions. So that sort of came together in the way of 4 key areas with multiple suggestions listed underneath each category. So we have things like support and prevention, and we're looking at supporting culturally responsive gender-based violence services for both survivors and perpetrators, working closely with our Indigenous partners. Then we have education and awareness, and through there, we're going to be hosting an annual intimate partner violence and gender-based violence forum for our community partners to bring them together so that they can connect and exchange ideas, develop innovative approaches here in our community in Brantford. We're going to be looking at enhancing our community partnership and collaboration. We're going to explore ways to promote the economic security of women survivors and looking to work with existing local partners to increase opportunities for our survivors to find employment, maybe in some apprenticeships or entrepreneurial roles, training, literacy training, life skill trainings to make sure that they can move forward in their lives appropriately. And then lastly, we're going to be looking at advocacy. We're going to be supporting local gender-based violence providers through promoting their existing campaigns and initiatives, attending their events. So I'm so proud of everything that's come out of here. And all of this really is in the spirit of breaking the cycle of systemic and generational habits. And the Indigenous community, someone once shared with me that they believe that what we're doing here today impacts 8 generations forward. And to look at why we're doing what we do today, we have to look 8 generations back. So really what we're doing here today is going to impact, 8 generations into the future. And it's going to take time to break down these barriers, but this is an amazing first step. And I'm really proud to be part of a council that's taking this seriously and moving forward with creating this action plan. So we break these cycles by educating our children, and I was so happy to see the Brant Haldeman Catholic School Board involved in this as well and looking to move forward with that. And we lead by example and we take a stand against violence. And so I dedicate this action plan to all the individuals who have been abused by their partners, either physically, emotionally, financially, sexually. About 6.2 million women who have reported that. To the 61% of Indigenous women who have experienced intimate partner violence compared to the 44% of non-Indigenous women. And I dedicate this to the 2S LGBTQIA+ community, those individuals who are 3 times more likely to experience violent victimization. So this resolution wasn't enough, but it was a step in the right direction. I'm so proud of this council for being a part of this. And Mr. Chair, I do have an amendment and some further questions, but I see you yelling at me to wrap up, so I will cease to stop talking now until it's my turn for second opportunity.
Counselor Samwell.
To that, I guess all I really want to add is just what an excellent example of what can happen when all of our wonderful community organizations come together and collaborate. I was also thrilled to see that we're starting young, and that we have the youth focused awareness program, and that we're going to be renewing annually. So again, I'm just thrilled with this report as well, and I look forward to seeing the changes that we can make with it.
Counselor Carpenter.
Yes, it's hard to add anything after Councilor Secolia has spoken. She's covered most of the things, so almost all of them. I want to say, people are quick to run down Brant County, but Brant County have always been very well at organizations working together. And this is an example of just that, all those 25 organizations coming together and working on this project for good reason and with good results. We kind of take it for granted that every other community is just like we are, where all the organizations work together. Well, that's just not true. That's one of the pluses that have been about Brant County for some time that we don't talk about enough, is how much the organizations do work together currently. And the only thing I would add to this, that it behooves all of us to speak up. You cannot remain silent when you see violence happening against women and abuse happening, and you can see it every day. If I'm picking the grandkids up at the school, sometimes I'll see it. But I know I've been shouted at before, don't say anything, you might get punched out. But I'm one of those people that has to speak up. I believe that silence allows it to continue. And as Councilor Scully said, it's generational. Young boys and young girls learn by what they see happening to their mother or their father. And what happens to them, they think is normal. And most children love their parents no matter what, under all circumstances, and then become to repeat that violence. So break the cycle is exactly the right thing. You have to break the cycle continuously till we're no longer, till those activities are no longer happening. The fact that the reporting, don't get too over anxious about the reporting. Reporting is good. The fact that we're getting, we have high numbers, high reporting. Other cities may not be getting the reporting as good as we are. We have some pretty good organizations that bring in the information where people know they can report. We do well. This report is a good reflection of how good our community really is and how good this resolution was in the first place. Thank you. Thanks for bringing it forward, Rose.
Councilor McCreary.
Chair, thank you. Yeah, this has been a good initiative, and I think we've all been happy to support this. I guess the other way that we should be advocating for breaking the cycle of violence against women has a bit to do with criminal justice system. So many abused women eventually evade further abuse by dying at the hands of the person that's been abusing them for months and years. And the criminal justice system in this country allows these people to do that. And that's equally necessary. And, in terms of speaking out, maybe it's time we spoke out. The federal government has been soft on crime for 8 years, and it manifests itself all around us, and it costs women their lives. And I think that's something in need of serious reexamination as well.
Thank you. Councilor Scully, would you like to bring forth your amendment?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the amendment that I'm bringing forward is seconded by Counselor Samwell. And it is adding a clause D, that a copy of this action plan be forwarded to the City of Brantford Brant County Joint Services Committee for discussion and consideration as a priority item. The reason that I'm bringing this forward today is that I know that the county has passed a very similar resolution and they experienced some hiccups. So I've been talking to other counselors and they would really like to collaborate with the City of Brantford. A lot of these services are used by both of our communities, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to come forward and work together on this epidemic of intimate partner violence, which both of our communities are experiencing. So in speaking with some counselors in the county, we thought this might be the most appropriate path for it to go. So I'm looking for support from this council that we may forward a copy of this action plan to all of the members of that Joint Services Committee and then discuss adding it as something that perhaps we want to work together on. Thank you.
Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. You know, when I began practicing law in 1981, one of the very first files that ended up on my desk was a matrimonial file where the client was a spouse who, facing this situation, you know, had to leave her home with her partner, living with family members because we didn't really at that time have the Nova Vita that we have today. You know, in some ways, I look back at that and, you know, thought to myself, both myself and the law firm that I was part of, a big supporter of Nova Vita, and often would speak about this scourge of intimate partner violence and how we simply had to change the dial. You know, in some ways, we've seen various changes in the criminal law system that does treat cases of intimate partner violence much more seriously than it did back in 1981. But, you know, we still have the issue. It's still very serious and still, I think, can be described as a crisis. And, you know, but there's still hope that with a determined effort, we can change the dial. And I've never seen a council come together on an issue like this. And to be able to highlight the fact that it's not just saying you are against, obviously, intimate partner violence, that you support by words programs that address this and try and change both our society, our culture, and provide supports for victims. But we also have to do something to help the various organizations that are providing that service. And so this is a great opportunity for us as a council, as a city organization, as a community to redouble our efforts to address this issue and provide real concrete support to the various agencies that are helping those who find themselves in these very unfortunate situations and working to help change society so there's less of a need for these kinds of services. And last, I'll just put a plug in. The Mayor's Gala on May the 4th, and it's not a cheap gala, it's not a bargain basement gala, but that's because it's really designed to raise money, and we hope about $75,000 on May 4th. Tickets available at the Office of the Mayor, and all the proceeds, the net proceeds, are going to Nova Vita. And so we're hoping to raise a lot of money for a great organization to deal with a social situation that's very serious. So, thank you.
Councilor Carpenter.
To the amendment. Thank you. Just and maybe to Councilor Segoli, because I was speaking with a county council colleague today that had raised this issue with me on the phone just a couple hours ago. And one of the suggestions that was made was if this were to go to our social services committee, and our social services committee would implement this collectively, then we could have then it would be a county citywide initiative already as part of that process. So I'm wondering if you would add the Social Services Committee as well to that list, or is it, unless it's already being done? Maybe I see that someone wants to speak to it. I'll wait till they speak to it. Remember, I only got 4 minutes.
To Mr. Chair, to the councillor, there is a resolution from the county, which is from their last county meeting, that there's about 3 items, intimate partner violence, that they would like to be sent to the Social Services Committee. Our terms of reference don't cover this area. They're very specific to the matters that were transferred over from the province. That's 4 services: children's services, Ontario Works, housing, and last but not least, homelessness. And so they don't cover this area because these are areas of domestic violence they're paid for by the province and are not covered under the areas that are transferred to the province. And that's the services we share with the county. And that's going to be my response to the county on this matter, and then actually suggest they send this to the Joint Services Committee.
Okay, so going to the Joint Services Committee, if they agree to that, we can add it to our terms of reference? Is that what you're suggesting?
Council can add anything they want by motion and by bylaw. But I would say that the first place it can be discussed, the Joint Service Committee, and then from there they can.
And then we get agreement, we can do that. Okay, that's great. I think I'll support this amendment 100%. Thank you.
Councilor McCreary.
Chair, thank you. I remain somewhat unclear as to the origin of the discussions about social services and joint services taking this on. Was a similar resolution introduced at County Council only to fail? Does that staff have any information about that?
It was, thank you, Councilor Scully. It was, I do have a briefing note on this. It was passed by resolution, but defeated in the budget and referred over to Social Service Committee. This is the memo that I've received for $30,000 for intimate partner violence, $80,000 for Nova Vita, another $218,000 for 3 agencies that they wanted to refer to Social Services Committee. And it was defeated in the budget, but passed over to Social Service Committee. But again, my response would be that it doesn't meet the terms of reference of the Social Service Committee.
So let me see if I understand this then. So the County of Brant had the opportunity to pass and act upon a resolution which would have been similar. Am I assuming correctly?
Yes, you're assuming correctly.
So they sent it off to a joint committee to either have the city of Brantford pay for it or to see it die on the vine. Is that a stretch, or?
So what they would like to do is come to the Social Services Committee, which is a cost shared committee. My response will be that it doesn't fit the terms of reference to this. And my response would be, if they do want to talk about it as a joint service, they can send it to the Joint Services Committee.
Okay, I get it now. Thank you. Thank you. It was as clear as mud previously, but Mr. Hutchings, you have calmed the waters, so I can see clearly now.
Councilor Scully, second time.
To the amendment, I just want to make this clear that the county has not come to us asking for funds. They're not looking to share costs with anything. I think that they've identified that there's this need to provide service for intimate partner violence. There is a need that surpasses any imaginary borders that us as counselors tend to respect maybe a little bit too much sometimes in these situations, but that they have their own financial restrictions. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but anybody can go online and watch the way that this played out in their budget process. They decided to contribute and to help on this topic financially, and then decided that they could not. They had some financial restrictions and they needed to remove that through their budget process. So, but in the spirit of continuing to move forward and support this cause, we thought maybe they could jump in and provide some support to moving this forward through our joint services. So they're not asking us for money. Absolutely not. I don't think it's about that. I think they want to be able to work with us and provide solutions to this epidemic and this crisis, and it's not financially driven.
Okay. Call the vote on the amendment.
The amendment carried on a recorded vote of 10-0. All those voting in favor are Councilors Sullivan, Celeste, McCreary, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Carpenter, Martin, Caputo, Secoli, and Mayor Davis.
Any discussion as amended? Seeing none, call the vote.
Item 6.1.6, intimate partner and gender-based violence carried on recorded vote of 10-0. All those voting in favor are Mayor Davis, Councilor Secoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Martin, McCreary, Carpenter, Samwell, and Van Tilburg.
All right, we have two resolutions on the floor that are going to need the rules waived. Councilor Caputo, can you please read your resolution, state your seconder?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's disposal of cigarette butts, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Sluss. Whereas the population of Brantford is approximately 106,000, and assuming 13.8 of the population smokes cigarettes, it's estimated there are 14,624 smokers in Brantford. And whereas arguably approximately 166,750 cigarettes are consumed every day in Brantford, with the annual number in the tens of millions. And whereas citizens who smoke at home or on private property are likely to dispose of cigarette butts responsibly, and whereas citizens who frequent public places are likely to dispose of cigarette butts on sidewalks, boulevards, parks, parking lots, restaurants, retail establishments, hospitals, children's playgrounds, natural habitats, roads, highways, and other public space. And whereas cigarette butts can enter stormwater sewers via gutters, find their way into the water treatment operations, and whereas in decades past, it was socially acceptable to dispose of cigarette butts on the ground, and whereas it's time to put an end to an improper disposal of cigarette waste and respect the environment we live, work, and play in, and whereas Brantford can be a leader in taking positive action to curtail the improper disposal of cigarette butts. Now therefore, be it resolved that the resolution be sent to MP Larry Brock and MPP Willem Bauma to prompt development of legislation for responsible cigarette butt disposal with the following considerations. Cigarette manufacturers to help fund the cost to manufacture and distribute butt disposal collection units outside locations which have a high prevalence of smokers. Incentives for companies to recycle used cigarette butts into consumer products. For the collection of cigarette butts to be categorized as community service by schools and service clubs, and that MP Larry Brock and MP Will Bauma be requested to engage in TV and social media promotions to educate the population on responsible cigarette butt disposal and the harm done to the environment from the irresponsible disposal of cigarette waste, and that staff be directed to collaborate with Wilfrid Laurier University and/or Conestoga College and the Environmental and Sustainability Policy Advisory Committee to develop a pilot an education campaign to urge responsible disposal of cigarette butts. And if I can, I'd like to speak to it.
First, you have to move the motion to waive the rules.
I'd like to make a motion to waive the rules.
Councilor Carpenter?
Yeah, the motion to waive the rules is debatable. Just want to, we're waiving the rules to deem the item urgent in order to consider it outside the budget process. So otherwise it would go to the next year's budget process. Can I have some assurance that the resolutions that were passed where we didn't waive the rules were all discussed at the budget process? Because I don't remember a bunch of resolutions at the budget process. Anybody know the answer to that question?
Through the chair, this was a question that we had asked the treasurer. They were built into the budget, so if the budget was approved, the staffing time, et cetera, was all built into the budget.
So all the resolutions were debated? I don't remember debating any of the resolutions.
So that the item, when it's approved, it gets built like to budget, so it gets built into the budgets is how we moved forward with those. They weren't separate reports on each one.
Okay, so there was none like approving a stop sign and so forth. All right. I guess I'll take that as a yes.
Through the chair for clarification, we debate the resolution at the committee of the whole, and then we ratify it at council. And once the debate is complete and it goes to the budget, it's not separated for further debate. It's built right into the budget.
That's clear. Thank you.
Councilor Tilborg, did you have anything with regards to waiving the rules?
Yeah, I take it there's no monetary fee to this? That would affect estimates?
No.
So I guess my question would be, what do we have to do to remove this process on all the items that don't have, we're having to waive the rules on numerous things that don't go to estimates because there's no money involved. I find this an unnecessary step. I agree with, I'm gonna support waiving the rules, but we shouldn't have to do this every time for items that have no monetary value. Is there a way that we can take care of this in the future? Like with a resolution that changes some of our wording so that monetary things are referred to estimates and non-monetary are not?
Yeah, I think Councilor McCreary is going to deal with that right now.
All right, wonderful. That's all.
Councilor McCreary.
Through the chair, sorry, so we're not gonna deal with it right now, but I would like to let you know we are working something in the background, to remedy this, which just came up tonight. But I would just like to say this was a process that we implemented back in August. It was something that we tried to help alleviate some of the staff resources, because a lot of the notices of motion that come forward use a lot of staff resources. So I think we have to find a better way at communicating how much staff resources these notices of motion are going to use, and still keep that if there is budget implications, they will be referred to the budget. But we are working on something in the background to help with this.
Just one more to Emma's comments. Yes, to Councillor Van Tilburg, item 1511.6 resolutions. It says all resolutions initiated as notice of motion shall be referred to the annual estimates process. We can change that with a couple words. It may say all resolutions that have budget implications. But right now it says all resolutions, and as I said, staff talked about that this morning, and we're going to look at making a change and bringing that back to council.
Okay, call the vote on the motion to waive the rules.
Thank you. The motion to waive the rules carries on a recorded vote of 9-0. All those voting in favor are Mayor Davis, Councillor Sokoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Slash, Martin, McCreary, Carpenter, and Councillor Van Tilburg.
Any further discussion? Councilor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we mentioned the name John Utley earlier, and this is another one. We should actually have it as the John Utley Honorarium. After listening to the man speak about his trip to Tokyo, and how they did things and all this stuff that happened while he was on his trip, and how impressed he was on how they handled cigarette butts and all the different things. I think there's a few more people that live in Tokyo, that live in Brantford, and how they actually managed to do all that certainly sparked a passion in me to try to bring this forward. I spend a lot of time every day at my place of business, always ensuring that I offer a very safe and clean storefront. We're forever picking up cigarette butts, and I don't understand that. It just, we're different societies. We're smoking less, but we're making just as big a mess. Every spring, neighborhood associations, charitable associations are out doing cleanups every spring to clean up stuff, and the majority of the stuff they're picking up are cigarette butts. As the snow disappears, it's just very evident. And we need to do something to try to alleviate this issue. Going to Bulldog games, I see people walking up to the stadium, and they're just disposing their cigarettes on the concrete. And we need to put an end to that. We have an opportunity to be an industry leader and a leader in Canada, because I don't think anyone else is really looking at this. And I think there's an opportunity for us with help with MP and MPP. From a cost perspective, I think I mentioned in here that I was looking for the cigarette companies to be responsible to fund disposals for us to be able to put these into various spots. And I expect storefronts and retail establishments to look after their own, as I've looked after our own property at the store. So there certainly is an opportunity for us. Keep Brantford clean. We got a lot of really, really great things happening in our community, and this is just one that needs to be considered. And I hope that everybody supports this and takes it seriously, right? So at the end of the day, to all smokers, let out properly. Thanks.
Counselor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And through you, I agree, you know, when I'm in the Tim Hortons line, getting myself, my wife a coffee, everybody that's smoking has got their cigarette hanging out the door. They think it's okay to butt the ashes out, and then they throw the cigarette butt out when they're done. You know, throwing a cigarette butt out is littering. We actually have bylaws for that. I don't know when the last time anyone's ever been fined for littering, but it would be nice to see someone actually get fined for throwing that cigarette butt out, because it is littering, and we do have bylaws for it. So there's two ways to eliminate this issue. Education's one, and the hammer is the fine. So, you know, when someone got fined for throwing their cigarette butt out the window, they would tell more than one friend. I can guarantee you, they would tell more than one friend. That they would be raving against the city. I got a bloody fine for a lousy cigarette butt. Well, they would tell 10 friends, and they might think, well, maybe that might happen to me, but there has been no fines. I don't know when the last time we seen a fine for littering, period, anywhere. And I know we keep talking about Tokyo. I mean, might be a clean cities, but they have a declining economy, by the way. We don't want that, but we do want a clean city. So I just wish that we had do the education. I'll support this because this is about education. And I guess Will Bowman and our MP are gonna do commercials for somebody, or we're gonna promote it somehow. But that may be part of the education, but the education needs to also include what the fine will be, what the fine is for littering. And maybe we could institute some of those fines through our bylaw department. Thank you. Not just the ones where the car is over the curb by 3 inches.
Counselor McCreary.
Chair, thank you, and I'll be mercifully brief. Perhaps people don't know that it's littering to throw a cigarette butt out the window. Perhaps they don't know that it's not biodegradable, like a roach or a stogie is. So perhaps the ticket is to, you know, provide education in advance of enforcement. Just to be clear. And if John Utley were here, he would ask, what are 3 things that we've learned from this tonight?
All right, call the vote.
Thank you. Item 7.1, disposal of cigarette butts, carried on a recorded vote of 9-0. All those voting in favor are Councilors Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Martin, Sless, Caputo, Sullivan, Sikoli, and Mayor Davis.
Thank you. I don't know how we top that, but Councilor McCreary, please read your resolution and state your seconder, and also the motion to waive the rules.
The night is young, Mr. Chair. So I'll read the resolution with respect to the waive, first of all, seconded by Councilor. Sorry, what, Mayor? Councilor Martin, or Councilor Martin is the seconder. Motion to waive is that section 1511-6 of chapter 15 be waived to deem the item urgent. Whereas a request for an accessible parking space in front of number 12 Galemount Court has been received. Now therefore be it resolved that an accessible parking space be installed at that address, and that any necessary bylaws be presented to City Council for adoption.
Any discussion? Seeing none, call the vote.
Thank you. The motion to waive the rules carried on a recorded vote of 9-0. All those voting in favor are Councilors Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Martin, Sless, Caputo, Sullivan, Sikoli, and Mayor Davis.
Any discussion on the motion? Councilor McCreary.
Chair, thank you very much. I hope everybody would be in support of this. It's a very standard request that we receive a number of times a year in each and every ward. And to hark back to commentary made by a member who's tuning in electronically, there is an initiative that I've asked for today to remedy our additional work required in waiving the rules to advance resolutions.
Councilor Van Tilburg.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious why this hasn't gone through what I consider a normal process where you just toss it to staff and it goes out there and a notice is given to the neighborhood and the parking spot is generally installed. I'm just kind of wondering why, because we don't bring every single one forward as a council resolution. They're often handled by staff and come forward and then we put them into the bylaws. So I'm just wondering what, how this came about in this way. If there's any information on that.
Yeah, so through the
Indy?
chair to Councillor Van Tilburg. So staff were working with the ward councillors on this. We recommended a warrant study, the procedure in terms of the notifications. But it was decided that the notice of motion was to come forward to council.
Well, thank you.
Any further discussion? Counselor Carpenter.
Yeah, I mean, I'll support this. I always support the ward councillors when they're trying to do things for their constituents. So I will support this. I just want, when it comes back to council, I want an understanding of how the street will be taken care of. This is now an accessible parking space for someone with disabilities. How we are going to handle the snow plowing around such vehicles. We have them across the city. So I'd like to make sure we have some policy about the snow clearing because we don't want to see an accessible spot plowed in. And I'm not looking for an answer today, Indy, because you'll have to give us an answer how you're handling them across the city. Thank you.
To the chair. So what I was hearing is you'd like staff to work on a policy on accessible parking spots or just provide you with how we maintain policy. I'd prefer direction on that.
No,
Process, we
just how
can-
how we're currently maintaining them or not maintaining them.
Yeah.
We'll decide whether we need policy at that
We
point.
can bring that to council.
Counselor McCreary.
Chair, thank you. In response to a prior comment, I would say that there are two streams by which these arrive on our desks. One is through staff and the other is through resolution at council. Quite frankly, the process through staff is it's appropriate in most circumstances. But it would have cost us an additional couple of months when this resident wouldn't be able to have access to a handicap stall. And the outcome would have been the same. So we've actually saved folks a lot of time, both on staff side and in terms of the resident by coming directly tonight. And Councillor Carpenter's point about snow is a pretty good one. I hadn't considered that before. And I think it's important that we have a staff opinion on how we deal with these things, because clearly we have dozens of them in the city of Brantford.
Call the vote.
Thank you. Item 7.3 carried on a recorded vote of 8-1. All those voting in favor are Councillors Carpenter, McCurry, Martin, Sluss, Caputo, Sullivan, Secoli, Mayor Davis. Those opposed, Councillor Van Tilburg.
Okay, there are two notices of motion on tonight's agenda. Counselor Caputo, can you please read the title of your notice of motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Polish Hall.
And in stay of Counselor Samwell, hers is home heating sustainability. Please note that the notice of motion deadline for next committee of the whole planning administrative meeting is this Thursday at 9 a.m. We are adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a quick announcement? I'd just like to announce that my wife and I become great grandparents on February 27th. Our oldest granddaughter, Mackenzie, gave birth to an 8-pound baby boy named Waylon. Thank you.